Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan and Carrie, Living the Smarter Science of Slim coming back at you this week. We are going through more of the 5 steps to help you go sane. Last week we talked about step number 1, which was eat so many non-starchy vegetables and so much protein that you're too full for starches and sweets. We talked about ways to do that affordably. We talked about ways to do that practically in terms of time. So hopefully that was helpful. This week we're going to move on to step 2, which is about remembering our ancestors. If anyone who listens to this podcast is at all involved in the paleo movement or is at all familiar with that community, you will be very familiar with the message we're going to talk about today. And if not, that's a good community to check out. They build off of a lot of what we say here, Living the Smarter Science of Slim. And it's all about remembering our ancestors, Carrie. Your ancestors are...
I'm not sure I like that too well.
Remembering your ancestors. Carrie, this is not a psychology podcast, so we're going to have to... we're just going to...
Hey, no, look, my grandfather, not my great-grandfather or my great-great, but my grandfather, i.e. my father's father, was born in 1889. I mean, I barely knew the man.
Your grandfather's grandfather?
No, my grandfather was born in 1889.
Wow.
Yeah, you see, so we're an incredibly spread out family.
Yeah, it sounds like you had some long generations.
There's some real long generations, so I never actually knew many of my ancestors to remember.
Wow. Well, that makes sense. Well, but...
And you thought I was being mean.
Yes. Now I stand corrected. Egg is on base. But the reason remembering our ancestors, as daunting a task as it may be, if you're someone like Carrie, is useful, is I keep saying this, but I think it's worth saying because it sort of illustrates how simple the solution to this problem has to be. And that's our ancestors didn't go to gyms and didn't count calories, and they were all healthier and slimmer than we are. And they also had dramatically less technology. And I'm not even talking about like a hunter-gatherer ancestors. That's a useful conversation to have. I'm talking about Carrie's grandfather. That's it. I'm talking about even my grandmother, or people who were alive and weren't babies in the 50s and 60s, ate food. Like before, I mean, that's all they did. And they had lower incidence of every debilitating disease we have today. I was actually reading something. I can't remember where this was from, but it was just brilliant. It was talking about the individual who invented a medical test to determine whether or not someone was sort of at risk for having heart disease. And this was in the early 1900s, I believe. And it's one of these funny stories where no one was interested in it because they're like, why would we even need this? Like, no one gets heart disease. Why would we need this test? It's sort of like that person who was like, why would you ever want to have a personal computer? No one would ever want to have a personal computer. It's just like, wait, what? Like, we assume these things to just be like 1 out of every 3 people is diabetic or pre-diabetic. What? In the turn of the previous century, less than 1% of the population was diabetic. Like, this is not the natural state for us to be in. So instead of thinking of all these newfangled technologies and like vibrating weight belts and the shake weight and like this gimmick pill system you need to go on, like nobody had those things. Like no one has raspberry ketones. We're not heavy and sick because we have a raspberry ketone deficiency. Like that just doesn't make any sense. But it sure does sell product. Like seriously though.
You're so funny when you get excited.
I get amped up about this stuff because it's so here. I'm gonna keep going.
This is entertaining. I'm gonna shut up and just watch.
Just watch. Okay, this is fun. This is inspired by an author by the name of Jeffrey Cannon. So Jeffrey talks about here's a 3-step plan to get rich quickly and for the rest of your life. Step 1, convince people that something is impossible. Step 2, sell them products to make the impossible possible. And step 3, repeat. So here's what's happened today with health and fitness. We've been told that we need to count calories. Okay, counting calories is impossible. Like it's literally impossible because when we decrease the amount of calories we consume, we also decrease the amount of calories we burn off. Like we're working against a moving target. The body adapts to changes we make.
And we don't know what it's doing.
Exactly. And we don't know what it's doing. And we don't know how many calories, like, for example, we look at protein. We've talked about this, right? You consume 100 calories of protein. You didn't actually consume 100 calories of protein. Like only 70% of those calories left your stomach. Another bunch of them get burnt off when they're converted to glucose. Like it's just impossible. But if I convince you that you need to count calories, now what do I get to do? I get to sell you all kinds of crap that makes that impossible thing seem possible. And then when it doesn't work, and then when you get sick, then I get to sell you pills to make you feel better. And then I get to sell you a gym membership so you can try to cut calories a different way. And then when you hurt yourself trying to do that, then I can sell you more stuff. And no one did any of that stuff before we were heavy and sick. So we can either do all of that complexity
I
and
need
continue
to move out the way. I'm going to get a black eye.
Here's the bottom line, folks. And we're like 5 minutes in, and I'm going to like peak the podcast right here. So maybe a short one. Okay, here's the bottom line. We have a choice to make. We can either take the complicated path. The complicated path is eat starches and sweets in mass and then do everything we're told we need to do. It is complicated and it's expensive and it's painful and it doesn't really work.
But it's told to us by experts.
But it's told to us by experts who generally get paid for telling us that information. True. Awesome. Or it's just a choice. Or we can not eat those foods and accidentally achieve health and fitness.
Woohoo!
Like here's an analogy. If you don't want to get lung cancer, you could smoke and like try to be creative and figure out different ways to not get lung cancer, or you could just stop smoking. and people are like, Jonathan, that's an unfair analogy, but I don't think it is. No one here is saying stop eating. We're saying eat as much as you want, whenever you want, as long as it's not starches or sweets. That's it. Like, and everything else goes away. It's not magic. It's common sense. And just if we remember our ancestors, it's glorious. Carrie, what do you think?
Well, I think that your
I'm going to go calm. I'm going to go fan myself off in the corner.
Your little tagline recently has been "Slim is simple."
Yes.
And I think that is what the point you've just made is that slim is simple. I do know that there's a few people that get upset about that because, and I understand why they get upset because for us who have been on the dark side and who have spent, X number of years trying to get there and failing continually, saying slim is simple feels like a ridiculous slap in the face.
Sure.
But what you mean is that slim is simple doesn't necessarily mean it's easy to do, but the actual doing it is simple. Just eat sane foods and do some eccentric exercise. Mm-hmm. It's simple.
Yeah, and that's a great distinction. I don't mean to, a core message of the Smarter Science of Slim is that this information is available and simple, but it hasn't been given to us. And
right.
that right there, like if anyone ever, I'm sorry, like if my tirade or anything ever seems like, well, duh. No, the whole message is that this isn't duh at all. We've been told to be like, again, let's go back to smoking. In the 20s, 30s, and 40s, we were told smoking was harmless. It is really simple to not get lung cancer. You don't smoke. But if you're told smoking is harmless, imagine how complicated it would be if we all thought that smoking was still harmless and we were all dying of lung cancer.
And desperately trying to figure out how to get rid of lung cancer.
Oh my God, what do? We'd like ban candles and like everyone would start wearing like weird masks and all these new pills would be developed. But that's not our fault. It's not our fault at all. But now that we're empowered with that information, the reason I say slim is simple is I want to protect us from people who try to complicate it. Like to me, if it starts becoming complex, you should that should smell funny to you. Like that should put up a red flag because it can't be complex. And here is an irrefutable argument as to why. Every single person basically up until 50 years ago did it, and any animal in nature achieves it. And we're much smarter than like deers, but
makes you wonder sometimes, doesn't it?
Well, no, but so here, do you want to know the single most effective way that researchers fatten animals for metabolic studies is to feed them what they call the cafeteria diet. Researchers tried for the longest time, like for decades, they couldn't get like rats or mice to gain fat because they would try to feed them more of like normal rat food or mice food, and the rats and mice would just stop eating. Like they don't overeat when they eat the right kinds of foods. But then they started feeding them processed starches, processed sweets, and processed fats.
Intelligent human food.
Intelligent human foods. And the rats got obese, diabetic, heart disease, all of those kinds of things. So again, any animal, and humans are animals, when fed this toxic food, basically, like we essentially get like lung cancer of our metabolism. These types of foods are to our metabolism what smoking is to our lungs. And if you don't want lung cancer, all you have to do is not smoke. And if you don't want these metabolic diseases, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all you have to do is not eat these foods. Instead, eat other foods. And of course, now let's be clear. People say, well, hold on a second. I know plenty of people who eat this processed crap and they're fine. Well, just to be clear, 20% of women who smoke will never get lung cancer, and 10% of men who smoke will never get lung cancer. However, men who smoke are 26 times more likely to get lung cancer than men who don't smoke, and women who smoke are 13 times more likely to get lung cancer than women who don't smoke. So just because not everyone is affected the same way by these substances does not mean they do not cause these conditions. Animal models, human models, tens of millions of people demonstrate if you want to avoid obesity, simply avoid these foods and you'll be good to go. And one point of clarification, there is a big difference between avoiding obesity and looking like a fitness model. Looking like a fitness model is not simple. Just like being an Olympic athlete is not simple. But not getting sick is simple. It's not our fault that we haven't had that information. It hasn't been given to us. But now that we do, I want us to feel empowered, and I want us to be on the defense for anyone that tries to complicate this, because the way people make money in this world is selling solutions to complicated problems
that we shouldn't have in the first place.
Exactly. And the easiest way to do that, just getting back to our step 2 here after my tirade, is to remember our ancestors, right? If your grandmother wouldn't recognize what you're about to put into your mouth, you might not want to put it in your mouth. And, you know, if your great grandfather...
Mine was born in like 500 then, in that case.
But that's the key things, folks. I mean, we're just talking about eating foods, but like literally look around your grocery store. It's not food. It's not. And it's poisonous. And the longer we live, I mean, hopefully folks saw this, came out a while ago, the New York Times article about is Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes. The basic point of the article was they're showing that when we experience these metabolic clogs, like our basically insulin breaks down, like we've talked about, and they're finding that that is correlating very highly with incidence of Alzheimer's disease. Folks, there is nothing in your life that will not be compromised by eating these crap foods. Might they taste good? Yes. Is it worth it? I promise you no, especially, as Carrie will tell you, is once you break that addiction...
They don't taste good.
They don't taste good, and you will get just as much pleasure from SANE foods. Just give it 21 days, and you will avoid all of this badness, and you will still be enjoying food and robust. And the fact that I just said robust, I think, just puts it over the top. Robust.
And I must say that the single most common comment I have about my SANE recipes is they taste so good. Mm-hmm. And I'm not doing that for my own, boosting my own ego. My point is SANE food can be every bit, if not more delicious than all the regular foods you're eating now. Going SANE does not mean a diminishing in your enjoyment of food or the way it tastes.
In fact, in a lot of ways, it's funny because people also say, I mean, I've heard this even people towards me, like, don't you like eating? And it almost makes me laugh because first of all, I consume more food than any of these people that are like, Jonathan, don't you like eating? So one, clearly those of us that are going sane, we love food. We eat a lot of food. That's the whole point of going sane. So we eat a lot of sane foods. The other thing to keep in mind is like someone who really likes, let's say, wine, like a wine connoisseur, they don't just drink any wine. They're selective about the wine they drink. Or if you really like music, like the more you like something, often the more selective you are about it.
It's quality, not quantity.
It's quality, not quantity. But I mean, we're going quality and quantity, which is kind of nice. But we're just being selective, and that's okay.
Anyone who's seen you eat ribs will never say, "Don't you like food?"
Absolutely, there's some good ribs too. I tell you, but it's true. It's actually interesting because we say your tastes will change, but what's actually happening is your taste buds will resensitize themselves. Like think of it as someone who was maybe drank a lot of caffeine. So someone who drank lots and lots and lots of caffeine, so it would require like 3 cups of coffee to give them any effect. And then imagine they stopped drinking caffeine for a month, and then they drank a small weak cup of coffee. They would get more impact from that small weak cup of coffee than they would from the 3 heavy cups, simply because they've resensitized their body to those things. So
it's like smoking.
Smoking.
You build up a resistance to it, and then, well, I've never smoked, but I understand that if you stop and then 2 weeks later you have one, it nearly kills you, whereas before you were on 20 a day. So it's a similar kind of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So a couple other things. When we talk about remember your ancestors, there's a couple caveats, right? That's a general rule. If all we ever did was remember our ancestors, we may, for example, be like, well, clearly we shouldn't use electricity because our ancestors didn't use electricity, or clearly we shouldn't get vaccinations or whatever, or shouldn't take aspirin if we get a headache. That we don't need to go that far, I don't think. That assumes that we've made no useful progress, and we have. For example, things like protein powders and like using a blender or things like that are fine. Rule number 1 is it sane? Is it high in water, fiber, and protein? And then just, if it's that, it's fine to eat. What you'll find is 90% of the time plus, those are foods, those are substances that our ancestors had access to. But for example, like plain Greek yogurt, I don't think was around in the 1950s, at least not in the States. That doesn't mean you shouldn't eat it, because rule number 1 is it sane? Oftentimes there's a relationship between the two, but don't be like, oh my God, whey protein powder. Well, clearly that doesn't exist in nature. So, you understand the point of what I'm getting at. Carrie.
I do.
You understand.
I do.
And then when it comes to processing.
It's a principle.
It's a principle. It's a general guiding principle. When it comes to processing, the only kinds of processing which I would quote unquote recommend are freezing. Freezing is obviously fine. You want to flash freeze food or freeze food in your own freezer. That's totally fine. Cooking is, of course, fine. Canning for meats and seafood is okay. I would steer away from canned vegetables and fruits. And, of course, grinding and blending is fine. Some level of preservatives, like beef jerky, right? Okay, beef jerky got some preservatives in it, but again, focus on the big things. Beef jerky is going to be fine. So
beef jerky is awesome for road trips.
It's awesome for road trips.
Keeps me awake for 12 hours straight when I'm driving.
Salmon jerky, turkey jerky, like there's all kinds of cool jerky options.
However,
get a bunch online.
Since we're talking about jerky, in this country, like in the last podcast where we were talking about whey powder, you got to read the label. Absolutely. Because there's some beef jerkies, you read them, they got more sugar than protein.
Yep.
There's actually one brand that I've found. I've become very intimate with beef jerky. And Jack's, I think it's Jack's Links, is the one which has the most protein and the least sugar. So you have to read the label.
Yes.
Even though you're thinking beef, protein, no sugar, read the label, you'll be surprised.
And to that end, not all sort of packaged type meat. Like there's also those like weird Slim Jim sausage link things. Like those are garbage. Like that's highly processed. The ingredients are.
Just read the label.
Unless you're getting 60 to 70% of the calories from protein, you might want to steer away from it. So, and just generally speaking, when it comes to ingredients lists, a general rule is that you're looking for about like 3 to 5 ingredients long. If it starts to get longer than 5 ingredients, that's a pretty good sign that it's rough
It's been
ground.
fiddled with.
It's been fiddled. I mean, there's exceptions. One of my favorite SANE snacks is what's called the Quest bar. Carrie's got some. I've got some. They're the sanest protein bars in the world. They're made with all natural ingredients. I'm in no way affiliated with the company. I wish I was, because I think they're going to be making lots of money, because the protein bar is incredible. Like 20 grams of protein, like 15 to 17 grams of fiber, almost no sugar. The ingredients list is, I think, like 7 or 8 ingredients, but they're all relatively pronounceable. They're all herbs. It's all good stuff. So,
and they taste yummy.
And they taste yummy. So again, those are available in the SANE store, but also a good option. So that is step number 2. Remember your ancestors. Remember that SANE is simple. If someone tries to complicate things, another example here is personal trainers. I used to be a personal trainer. We're going to talk about exercise a lot later. Personal trainers can be awesome, but just like anything in life, there's good and bad. Personal trainers that make you feel like exercise is so complicated that you cannot be successful at it unless you hire them are not people you want to spend your time with. Exercise is not complicated. There's 4 basic movements, and if you do them, you'll get 90% of the benefit. If you want to be an Olympic athlete, it's incredibly complicated, but that's not our goal. So
that is definitely not my goal.
Not our goal. So step 3, Carrie, we kind of covered already in with step 1, was buying groceries in bulk to save money. But I know you had some things you wanted to add here.
I did.
I thought you did. Do you not?
Well, that was 20 minutes ago. Who knows where I am now?
After my rampage.
Now your tirade, I've gone off down another track. Well, buying in bulk. So I think for one of the problems with places like Costco and Sam's Club, and I'm specifically talking to us single people now, is that Costco can be really scary, and you save money, but then you end up throwing half of it away because you can't eat it all. So for me, in the States, I found Trader Joe's is probably the best non-bulk, cheapest way to go.
Well, and can you freeze stuff? I mean, because I did Costco when I was not living with my wife, and I was able to, well, a couple things. Like,
yeah, but you're a weirdo.
But but you can't just freeze stuff? Like, if you make, well, one, it saves you time, right? Like, I would cook on the weekends, and then I would freeze a bunch of stuff, and then I'd have access to it.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want it to be clear, if you want to eat something different every day. I'm talking about things
like fresh spinach, and that's I'm talking about those bags of spinach at Costco. The bag's big enough I could climb in it.
Carrie, I'm going to have to disagree with you here, because according to Smarter Science Slim, that big giant bag of spinach, that's like 2 days worth of spinach, even for one person. I mean, I know we're talking about baby steps. It's 2.5 pounds, and it has 13 servings of spinach in it. So technically, eating that entire bag of spinach in one day, well, I mean, that you should eat different kinds of vegetables, but that's within the frame of reference. I've done it before.
I love vegetables, and I eat all sorts, and I don't want to eat 10 servings of spinach in one day.
But the key point here, folks, is that as much as possible, if you can come up with a list of staple items, salmon, good nutrient-dense beef, chicken, other kinds of fish, a few vegetables that you really, really like, some low-sugar fruits, some low-sugar dairy products, some nuts and some seeds, just write a list of that out. And try to be consistent with it. Buy them in bulk, buy them on sale. You will be surprised at how affordable it is, because that's food. It's not packaged. It's commoditized, meaning one store can't charge 15 times more for spinach than another store. Whereas, if you have Sugar Smack Puff Deluxe, no one knows what the heck that's supposed to cost. So the food manufacturer charges $5.99 a box. And for what? The box costs more than the product inside of it.
It tastes better too.
That's true.
Now, I did want to say, though, that one thing that I find, talking to my single friends here again, is that if you do go down the Costco Sam's Club real bulk on fresh vegetables, one way I have found to deal with that, if I can't get through eating them all, is 1, add them to the smoothies for breakfast, or 2, is make soup. Yep. And I'm going to be putting a bunch of soup recipes up soon. And that's a great way, because you can make soup so you don't waste all those veggies that you can't eat. And then you can freeze the soup. And, then you've got instant lunches or, soup that you can just get out whenever. So there are ways of dealing with it if buying vegetables in bulk feels too much for you, there are ways that you can learn to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. And a couple of things which may be helpful too is if you're pressed on time, buying in bulk can be useful too. I go grocery shopping once a week. Sometimes I used to do it once every other week. Vegetables usually go bad in about a week, but it allows you to only shop once a week. Another thing which can be useful is while buying in bulk can be intimidating. Like, I mean, I live with my wife and we live in a teeny tiny condo, but knowing you have to eat this giant bag of spinach or else you're going to waste it is a good motivation to actually get you to eat the giant bag of spinach. So, and if if you keep your refrigerator so full, that's actually a good rule, Carrie, right there. If it doesn't need to be refrigerated or frozen, there's a good chance it's insane. The exception to this, of course, is nuts and jerkies and seeds. But basically, your pantries should be essentially empty.
Well,
and your refrigerators, there's seasonings and stuff.
Not
but
empty. There's almond flours and coconut flours and all those kind of things. Ingredients,
but not like foods you would take out. Okay, that's a good distinction. Yeah, you should not be able to take something out of your pantry and put it into your mouth.
Right.
But your refrigerator and freezer should contain those things.
Yeah,
that's a good distinction.
I have to say that the amount of food I have out of the fridge or the freezer is minimal. You open all the cupboards in my kitchen and everyone's like, where's the food?
Yeah. Well, that's because, what is...
Like, it's in the fridge.
Those are starches and sweets are the things that don't need to be refrigerated, but really everything else, even nuts, most people don't know this. Like, if you buy nuts and you keep them in your fridge, they taste a lot better, a lot longer.
Actually, you should store nuts. If you buy nuts in bulk, you should store them in the freezer. You should only keep nuts out of the fridge for no more than 4 weeks at a time. So I put the bulk nuts in the freezer and then I keep what I use in the fridge.
Oh, nice.
Because nuts have a high amount of fat, which goes rancid, particularly if it's warm. So particularly if it's summer or you live somewhere warmer, you should keep them in the fridge. But if you buy in bulk, just store them in the freezer. They're perfectly fine.
It is a very, very good tip. So, and there's of course there's also canned things like canned salmon, canned tuna, canned chicken. Of course, if it's canned, you can keep it in your pantry. But again, I think folks get the gist. And again, don't be afraid of frozen stuff. Frozen things are often pretty easy to buy in bulk. Frozen vegetables and frozen fruits can sometimes be even more nutritious than the fresh variants because they may actually be frozen when they're fresh, whereas the fresh vegetables may have been sitting there for a couple of days. So.
And the frozen, particularly the fruit, we use... now I do. I use quite a lot of berries now that before maybe most people would only use when they're in season. But if you're adding them to the desserts and breakfasts that I've come up with, or you're adding them to smoothies, to have them frozen is awesome. One, because they're so much cheaper than buying out of season berries in the winter. But it's so convenient because they don't go bad. You can just get your cup out the freezer every day and it's all goodness. So frozen berries is a brilliant way to go.
I completely agree with the frozen berries, and I'll even take it one step further and say that I've found that frozen berries actually can work better than fresh berries in some contexts. And Carrie, you may or may not back me up on this one, but for example, Greek yogurt. If you take Greek yogurt or cottage cheese and you put frozen berries in it, and then you kind of like take it with you to work, and the berries thaw out.
Yep.
That tastes distinctly different than if you just put fresh berries in, because it's like the juice kind of permeates out. Or if you kind of microwave the berries a bit or just put them under hot water, it definitely tastes different, and I think it tastes better.
So that's a brilliant point that you beat me to making. Damn it! But
I win.
All the breakfasts that / desserts that I've done on my website, and you'll see they're almost all made with frozen fruit, and they actually need to be made with frozen fruit. You will not get the same result if you do it with fresh fruit, because the recipe is built to rely on the juice that is released as the fruit defrosts.
The juice that is released.
Whatever that happens when the fruit thaws.
Released.
That's part of the recipe. You will not get the same result if you don't use frozen fruit.
If it doesn't release, you will not enjoy it.
I'm going to smack you in a minute.
So, oh man, there was something else I was going to tell people. I can't remember what it was. It was important. Carrie, fill the gap.
Seafood just reminds me that prawns are expensive, right?
Yes.
So when I don't buy them, when they go on sale, I'm there. I'm 10 bags of prawns at half price. That's when I buy them. And of course,
freezing is great.
If you buy them, if you buy enough when they're on sale, that'll get you through to the next time they're on sale, because it happens regularly, right? So I think I've become a lot more aware of my buying patterns. So there's some things I only buy when they're on sale. I just buy enough until I know the next sale's coming around, particularly on things like prawns, shrimp that are expensive.
Absolutely. So I just remembered, thank you for filling the gap, Carrie, what I wanted to say, and that's because I was doing a radio interview last weekend, and this came up, and we talked about this last week a bit, but I want to reiterate it here. We talk about going sane. We're always talking about putting practicality first. Life's complicated enough. Let's try to keep things simple. Now, folks here, meat, seafood, vegetables, fruit, then they start to think, oh my God, okay, organic, oh my God, locally grown, wild caught, grass fed. Okay, all of those things like organic, local, grass fed, wild caught are wonderful. If you have the time and money to do them, more power to you. However, if you do not, please don't worry about it. Like I've heard many times people are like, oh, well, I can't afford organic or local fed, so I just don't do it. Please don't do that. Like eating a conventional, sane diet, meaning, conventional poultry, conventional seafood, conventional fruits, conventional vegetables is so much better for your health than eating like a teeny tiny serving of wild caught fish and then like a bunch of rice because you can't afford enough of the fish, so you have to fill yourself up with starches and sweets. Like sanity first, organic, wild caught, blah, 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 second, if you can afford it and if you have the time. But please don't let that overwhelm you or make it seem like this is impossible, because it is absolutely not a requirement. It's totally optional.
And as we said in the last, well, at least I said in the last podcast, every step moving in the right direction is a step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Don't be overwhelmed by you've got to go from A to Z in one step.
Yep.
Every step closer to sanity is goodness.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, Kay, I don't know if I can top that, because that is 100% true. Something is always better than nothing, so let's keep stepping towards sanity. And next week, I think we'll be able to finish up our top 5 tips, because we are going to talk about, we're going to talk a little bit about what to drink when you're going sane. We'll probably talk a little bit about alcohol too, because people always ask about that. So we'll talk about alcohol. We're going to talk about water.
At step 4. Step 4 is my Achilles heel.
So we will talk about Carrie's Achilles heel next week, folks. Thanks for being with us this week. Smarter Science is Slim. Eat more, exercise less, smarter. See you next week. Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff, like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would